Whitney, thank you so much for coming onto Studio Class's Masterclass episode. I am so thrilled that you are here, and I was hoping that you would kick us off by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Whitney George. I am a composer and conductor based in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the artistic director of a group called the Curiosity Cabinet, which is known to mix music and other disciplines together in a smorgasbord of sort of theatrical events that kind of defy boundaries and labels.
I love that. That's so great. So I love that. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on Studio Class so much, is that you, like lots of our friends, have such a wonderful multifaceted career. And I think that's so important. That's such a part of who we are as creative people. And so I love hearing you talk about all those different things and how they come together to make up the wonderful creative person that you are. So, Whitney, with that in mind, I love to ask people, what is an intention that you're keeping for yourself right now?
Intention that I am keeping for myself right now. I think I'm holding myself really accountable to schedule and making that a part of my practice. And I think that one thing that I am really trying to sort of aspire to is just being more in tune with myself as a creative individual, and assessing what that is. And so I think I've done a lot of kind of soul searching recently, and I really encourage everyone else to do this kind of thing of like trying to catalog when you do your best work, at what point during the day, like under what circumstances and environment are you doing like your best creative, like where is your creativity during the day. And so I've been really intentional about kicking off the day with what I would be most fulfilled with doing, which is writing music. So setting off the day on the right foot, no matter how much I have on my plate. If that means I have early morning meetings, that means getting up earlier than those early morning meetings. But writing, because like writing really fulfills something for me as, an artistic person. And so I think like setting that intention has been, or it's more maybe a ritual, I suppose, has been really, really important. But in doing, I teach composition as well, and I really try to practice what I preach, of course. And so, when my students feel really stuck about something, I ask them, I was like, well, what is your commitment to writing like, when do you do your best, in trying to ask them that sort of thing. And I also, I guess another commitment is the other thing, to just getting rejected a whole bunch. And I decided, actually, so funny that we're talking now, I decided like last night that I was or 2 nights ago, that I was framing things not so good for my creative soul, I guess, which was that my thing has been like, on a yearly basis, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring, whatever that ring is, whatever that hat I might be wearing, whatever it is, I'm going to do that action, X number of times during the year. And it's a great goal. I love that as a goal, intention setting and such, love that. However, I thought about the idea of, instead of throwing something out into the universe and not thinking about what comes back from it, instead thinking about collecting the return. So it sounds maybe stupid, or silly, or maybe nonsensical, or even the same thing, but the idea of, instead of throwing my hat out into the ring, collecting rejections instead. That I should have a yearly goal as to how many rejections I should collect for myself. And I thought about like that already puts me in a different sort of head and mind space of that, like, actually proportionally something might actually win, so I actually have to do more than just expect to get rejected. And so I guess doing some of these just studies of psychology with myself and trying to just be better attuned with myself as an individual has sort of led to kind of I guess in settings of intentions, whether it's be like longer goals or like more practical, daily oriented things. That was a very long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, hi, honey. We are on a podcast. Long answers are are what I'm looking for.
Good. Okay.
So I love that. Also, listeners of this podcast are definitely familiar with like the collect 100 rejections in a year, like post and stuff like that. So I love that you brought this up as a way to be thinking about collecting the return. I wonder if you feel similarly to me that there are parts of our lives or our careers in which it is healthier for us to collect just the output. Like it's healthier for me to focus on just putting my hat into the ring. And then years where it's healthier to think about what I am going to measure the outcome, right? What is happening? Is it coming back to me? Are there yeses? Are they nos? Are they maybes? Like whatever. So I'm
Totally.
wondering if that's something that you've bumped into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot to be said for like going through the motion of things, even if you're not like feeling it. Like I do this even when I'm not like feeling creative during the day. I'm like, oh, maybe I don't want to write music. I was like, it doesn't matter. Like going through the motions and doing it is the whole part of being focused on a craft, right? And like not waiting for inspiration, or like the idea of like just engaging of the activity of doing a thing and pushing it out there. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of place for that as well. I thought that just the idea of collecting a negative thing was kind of just like an interesting sort of take. Like, yeah, bring it on, the rejection, bring it on.
Yeah.
I'm ready for the rejection. I'm here for the rejection, you know? I'm ready to be not someone's cup of tea or whatever it might be. Like, and sometimes, yeah, I think though that like trying to assess what you need at a given point is also like a wonderfully valuable tool. And sometimes the act of doing, oh gosh, there's this very sort of self-reflexive thing of like, where like you don't feel creative because you're not creating, and you're not creating because you don't feel creative. And so that the idea of just like, okay, just like get yourself in the motion is great. And I think throwing your hat into the ring is a great act of doing that.
Yes.
Watch something that, let me push it through into this world. And like and then, not expecting anything is a great thing in that regard as well. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Whitney, I'm curious. I'm going back to one of the things that you mentioned about soul searching. And I feel like we say this as a phrase, but we don't always know what that means. And I'm curious if you have, when you're talking to your students or when you're talking to yourself, what does that mean for you? Like if you're soul searching about what's the best time for me to write, all that kind of stuff, what does that look like as a process?
That's a great question. Yeah, like what does that actual underground work look like there? I think that when I'm talking about soul searching, I guess I'm trying to figure out what makes me produce the best work to the best kind of capacity, and understanding what it is that makes me tick in that way. And I guess a lot of my 20s was spent under the umbrella of thinking, but knowing better, that the troubled artist who leads a troubled life is going to have a fulfilling artistic output.
Oh, really?
Oh, I know. It's only perpetuated in like the books we read, the cinema we consume. A lot of the narratives deal with these like tragic, artistic, really unhealthy individuals, horribly unhealthy. And I'm no stranger to like taking a bender on like, or like, whatever it might be. But and so I have a whole, taking a very, very small side tangent, I have a whole lecture that I kind of teach about like the idea of the crossroads between drugs and music, and the
Oh,
idea of musical
interesting.
output. And so
I
like,
didn't know that you had that. That's so
yeah,
cool.
I mean, it's a cool lecture that's I'm not necessarily allowed to teach within the college boundary. So I teach
Right.
it through Thinkolio or something like that. And so I
Right.
talk about like psychedelics and like the idea of like a lot of minimalism, and the idea that like people of that time were really indulging in psychedelics, but not necessarily the people that were creating them. And I've got a whole quote about, Philip Glass, who's it talks about like, hey, like, yeah, I definitely had my heyday and dabbling in that sort of stuff, but like truly when it comes to actually sitting down and like doing the thing and writing the thing, like you can't really just be like hung up on all sorts of drugs and doing that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so the idea of like the tormented artist of my 20s, and living that kind of lifestyle emotionally, I think more than like physically. I wasn't going around doing heroin or anything. No one can. This podcast is not going to be quite that exciting in
No.
terms of content, right? But
No.
like, the idea that um contentment does not breed creativity. That doesn't mean that like being uncomfortable is what's going to breed creativity, or being comfortable is going to like not give you that impetus to create. And so I think undoing a lot of that kind of thinking has been important.
Yeah.
Giving myself enough sleep, making sure that I'm actually like drinking enough water. I sound like someone who's truly aging right now, right? And like making sure you have the right pillow. Like I'm not,
Yes.
no, I'm not, but kind of ritual. And so like I know that if I'm going to try to get 10 hours of work done, or if I have a wicked schedule, like, and I have to meet a bunch of deadlines, that means I compose in the morning and I compose in the evening, and I have to give myself a mental break in the middle of the day. I'm like, I might be able to write a minute of music in 1 hour, but if you ask me to write 10 minutes of music, you can't give me 10 hours consistently to like try to clock all of that in. And so knowing what that actually looks like for
Yeah.
you, and battling burnout, because of that's a, I think as we're asked to do like so much more,
Yeah.
we are totally asked to be Renaissance individuals, I feel, in the artistic field. And I think some people like thrive and blossom on that. Other people, that's not what they are sort of meant to do, right? And so when you're trying to like do all of these things, like working as efficiently as possible is actually going to be a key indicator to like how to be successful. Okay, so like how did I figure out all of this stuff about myself? Like keeping record. I'm a religious notebook keeper
Yeah.
for everything. It's downstairs right now, which isn't particularly helpful, but I have like a whole bookshelf of notebooks that include everything from sketches of pieces, things that absolutely matter nothing, like being upset with the Charities Bureau right now for losing a register, like what exactly charities anyway, like everything
Yeah.
from and cataloging it. And I have found that I've got like a little app that tells me like today you did X number of things. That's like the days I'm most productive, I do the things that make me like thrive as a little plant. Like it kind of, and so just listening,
Yeah.
your body usually screams these things, weirdly enough. I'm also like, I'm not one of these necessarily like hippie oriented people who's like, let me like touch the dirt and like be the land or whatever, right? So like, I promise I definitely just had a hamburger for lunch. So I'm not like, I'm not, I'm not like, I'm a, I'm of both worlds, but I think it's important to the kind of, at least creatively figure out when you're doing your sort of best work, kind of coming
Yeah.
full circle there.
No, I think that's great. I think that's so much of like figuring out all of those things is if you start asking yourself those questions, you'll also bump into other things that, you just need to peel back the veil on, look at it a little bit more closely. I think you've given us so many ways to ask yourself questions, to kind of be in dialogue or relationship with yourself and with others, to kind of help you understand, when do I do my best work? When do I do these things that also make me a healthy human being? And does it include, you know, so I love that you brought up kind of like the psychedelics and art conversation, also because it's like, what are the things in the world that will help me be like a open to my best artistic and creative self, and in what format, right? And so it's like, so the Philip Glass quote is being like, well, I can't be that and also be writing at the same time, right? So, but you have to figure out what opens the door for you, or like what allows you to get the work done, right? Those are all those things that you're just figuring out. You mentioned teaching. I mean, I know that teaching is such a big part of what you do,
Mm.
and you teach in multifaceted ways, in addition to all the other multifaceted things you do. You teach, lots of different age groups, you teach lots of different subjects, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I love asking about, what is a skill that you love to teach? Usually I ask this, like, if we're talking kind of like vocalist to vocalist on this one, like, what's a technical skill that you like to teach? But
Mhm.
I'm curious, you can take that in any different way that you want to, with like, usually like, what's a hard skill, right? What's something that you can be like, here's the process?
Yeah. So, okay, that's a great question. So I've spent a lot of time because a lot of students that I have are just starting their compositional journey.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of kind of formats for what will work to like kind of like a plug and play. Like if you put this information, like this kind of a thing here and this kind of a thing here, and then like put a cadence here, you can end up with melody, right?
Yeah.
So that's not exactly like what we're talking about. But in terms of technique, compositional technique that I like to try to okay, well, there's two there. Well, one's not so much a technique as like a sort of, this is what I'm known to say during my lessons, which is kind of fun as well. But a lot of students will come to me with a big problem. Everyone comes to me with the same problem. I'm stuck. I'm stuck and I don't know where to go. I'm stuck
Yep.
and I don't know where to go. I love that problem. I love that problem. What
Yep.
a great problem to have. I'm stuck and I don't know where to go. So I usually will have someone take their melody and break it off into, well, all sorts of different sections. I'll do what I kind of call an Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky was really known for like writing his stuff, but then like cutting it up into different building blocks and then moving all those building blocks around. And so I
Yeah.
encourage them to kind of do that as a technique, is to take their ideas, segment them, and try to challenge that in terms of what can you get by just rearranging some of these segments, turning some of these segments upside down, reversing some of these segments, but just these materials. And it kind of
Hmm.
comes back to my idea of like, what makes a good piece of music? Like, why would we even do this in the first place? And I think a good piece of music, something that withstands the test of time, has a strong sense of organic unity to it.
Hmm.
It's like the idea of cooking with a secret ingredient, and that ingredient is sort of like through the entirety of the dish that you're creating. And so by reconstructing things that are a part of the thing that you're already working with, you are assured that you will have organic unity within the piece of music. So that's one thing that's like kind of something that's easier to do with an actual example as a tool.
Yep.
If you're really, 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 really stuck composing, there's a fun thing that I usually suggest to my students, which is to listen to a piece of music and decide where the composer didn't spend enough time and rewrite the piece starting from that point.
Ah!
There's so many really cool, like kind of early 20th century kind of post-tonal things where I'll like hear a snippet and I'm like, where did it go? Where was that
Wow.
amazing little melodic thing? I could hear that for like a whole, like, big, huge. So sometimes I'll be like, hey, you don't know where to start, like, can you take these 4 notes in this figuration and do something with it, that and
Yeah.
use it from the context of analyzing a piece that we're kind of pivoting from. So
Yeah.
um learning by example, or rewriting different melodies to people's accompaniment, I find is a very fun activity for my younger, like 7 and 8 year old students who are like,
Yeah.
learning piano things. I'm like, could we try something that, like, uses these chords in a different sequence, or anyway, but like I like the idea of looking at something and then taking it apart,
Yeah.
and then having people kind of look at the pieces in that sort of way, and look at good masterpieces, understand really what it is to be built like that, and then replicate it in your own sort of fashion. So I don't know if those are really necessarily what you're working, but like those are
Yeah.
2 things that I like to
I
incorporate in
love
my
those.
teachings.
Do you,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to soapbox for just 1 second, which
Yeah.
one of the things that you brought up, I don't think that singers are usually encouraged to play with composition as much as they could be. So I feel like um, the point about giving building blocks for creativity that way is so helpful and so interesting and wonderful. And I'm just excited that you brought that up, because in this space we can encourage each other to, that composition doesn't always have to be like suddenly you're 100% writing symphonies, right? Like that, I think that's kind of this expectation, especially if you've gone to music school, that composition is this like lofty thing that you're not allowed to touch. Like, and so
Totally.
I love that you brought up just a way where all of us who are involved with music can play and be creative and be composers in their own way by just simply taking the building blocks that are already there and changing them up a little bit and see what that does for you. Do you want to add anything else? Do you want to try it a different way? So thank you for just kind of offering
Oh,
that as like a permission slip, for anybody who's listening.
absolutely.
That's great.
I think that's really, really important. And I think that where music education has majorly like fumbled in terms of like the handoff between performance and composition is the idea that, I mean, at least I remember, and I was a very serious musician. No one ever like pulled me aside and was like, this is how music theory relates to the thing that you're actually performing right here, right now.
Yeah.
This is the phrase of your melody. This is how your melody is grouped into, like, this is how the cadential motion works with the melody here. This is how the transition builds tension to, like, so one of the things that I'm very glad that I'm able to work with. So I've got this adorable student, and I'm sorry to even use her as an example. She's not so much a composer, but I don't like, in terms of, she doesn't like to write music without me being there.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay.
She sometimes like messes around on the piano, but she'll never like write her own stuff. She likes me to help her like with rhythmic dictation. It's a scary thing to like hear some things and not quite understand. So, we've been doing the thing where we conduct, we tap things out and all this other stuff. But in terms of this little bean, she just like, she starts with showing me the music that she's been working on, and then I have her apply the terms of composition to what she's working on,
Yeah.
and then we see what's worked in the, like, so I asked her, usually it was like, what's your favorite part of playing this piece?
Yeah.
It's usually the part where we've gone into minor, because of course that's the best part, right? And so I was like, hey, like, why don't we try to do that ourselves? And
Yeah.
like, and copying by imitation, we learn how to do these things, and by engaging with what you're working with at someone else's piece, and sort of anyway, I think it's a wonderful tool to kind of build off. Not, you're recreating the wheel is not necessary.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
such a good point about being able to integrate all of the things that we're learning, right? I I think it's so fascinating that we can be in all these different courses, but we don't always integrate the knowledge into like how we are musicians or composers, that way. So important. Anyone who's listening, please ask ask your mentors for help integrating that information, because it just makes it so much better when you know, right?
Totally. You're like, oh, this is the B theme that I'm singing right now.
Yeah.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is actually, oh, it's actually really A1 and it's a variation of like, it's that enriches your experience of the music and helps
Yeah.
like create an actual interpretation that feels authentic. And I mean, that's what we come back for, is different interpretations. And how do you make a good interpretation? By understanding the piece of music. How do you understand the piece of music? By like looking at the parts. How do you actually really understand the parts? By trying to make them yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Even even if you really suck at it, just trying to make it yourself.
Yes.
Just trying. Yeah.
Just
So
try. There's no, like, you get to do it on your own. Nobody's judging this. It's not for a grade. Like, I love it. Whitney, I'm
yeah.
going to kind of pivot a little bit, but it's a similar kind of question, just on a different side of our lives, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit more the business side of what we do. And I think that you have such a beautiful entrepreneurial mind in so many ways. And I I talk a lot about micro actions, like, throughout all the places that I put things. Like, and so micro actions, I always give the same example. A micro action is not write the grant, right? As you and I both know, that's a whole thing. There's lots of different parts, right? Micro action is like, finish the budget for this grant, right? Like, this, really just trying to bring things down to their most elemental parts so that you can have a specific measurable thing that you can achieve.
Mhm.
For your life and your like, professionally creative work, do you feel like there's a micro action that you've done consistently that's helped you just kind of move forward or feel momentum in your career?
Oh, good. That's a good question. I think the commitment to getting my ideas out on paper is really important. Oh, wait, actually, weirdly enough, it's okay. So like kind of a micro action, but like, no, I'll talk about the other one first. Sorry. Sometimes I have many divided minds. Um, I think that the wow, there's a lot of traffic now happening outside. That is like, it's Honk City. So sorry. It drove me right off my track. The idea of writing consistently and getting my thoughts down on paper. I have a working to-do list that
Yeah.
I work off of on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That to-do list has different, like I made different benchmarks for myself, or treat myself or reward myself based on how much I do during the day or
Yeah.
whatever. One of the list has a bunch of different things on it. It has write in my notebook.
Yep.
It has go out and get exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do your 10,000 steps, or like go running, or do the row machine, whatever it might be. Other things are like much more, one is engage in one active self-love and self-care.
Yeah.
One of the other ones is do something nice for someone else.
Yeah.
And so I find that I will check them. My most fulfilling days will have like a different kind of, or a kind of order that I check things off in, and that I usually try to, one of the micro actions that I have found that is, I think, and it seems kind of stupid, is doing something for yourself and for someone else at the outside of the day, and then doing your
Yeah.
creative thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
So
that.
yeah. So it can be really, really small. It could be
Yeah.
like making someone coffee in the morning. It could be like, picking up someone's dry cleaning if that's what needs to happen. It could be, sometimes it's like giving someone a free lesson, or going majorly overtime with a student and giving
Yeah.
them, yeah. Or, just like pulling a solid for, making the phone call to someone and letting them vent for like whatever it is. But like, but I think the important part is like doing it, but also recognizing that that is something that you do, and like checking it off. And so,
Yeah.
and I mean, I've been like really consistent in this for like like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
How did if you don't mind me asking, like, how did this kind of form? How did that you start to kind of coalesce around these things?
I mean, I love notebooks. Holy
Yes.
moly. I mean, like I love stationery. I love notebooks. There's nothing, there's something, okay, there's some really, really simple things in this world that are really, really, really beautiful. One of them is sneezing. Sneezing's a great thing. I love sneezing. This idea that you like have something that itches in your nose and that you immediately sneeze. I love it. Okay, the other thing that's on this list is checking things off of a list.
Oh, so satisfying. Like,
So good. You've got the piece of paper and you're like,
yes.
it's done. And so I think that simple pleasure of literally checking something off of a list, I go crazy for it. My sister and I are so similar. I went out to visit her and she's like, you know what it's time for? And I was like, what? She's like, it's time to make a list. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
I'm so ready. And so she's like, she's there with her long paper and she's got
Yeah.
totally different handwriting than me. And I love to see it. And so, oh, also, I can't say this, like we type so much. Please,
Yeah.
like, write something by hand. I love the
Yeah.
things that are written by hand. But I got into this. I think I just recognized that it was a really simple pleasure that existed in life. Like, when you like tear the wrapping off of something in a particular way, or you can get like an orange peel off in one go. It's
Yeah.
like one of those simple sorts of things. And so I think that's how I got addicted. I just got addicted to it. And
Absolutely.
it makes me feel really good. And that doesn't mean that there aren't days that I don't do things.
Right. Right.
Like that's allowed. Like that's
Yeah.
it's like, one of it is like dick off, or like, so they're like Saturdays or whatever days that I have, they're like, you don't have to fulfill your goal, or I don't, sometimes I still do things, sometimes I don't, but like, yeah. So allowing yourself that leniency, those kind of cheat days, if you were like doing a diet or something like that, I'm bad at that sort of stuff, but like, you don't have to be, I'm not saying that you do like be the workhorse that you have to check off, but like there's something really, really satisfying about I got it done.
I love that. And Whitney, I'm sure you can imagine that like making a list comes up practically most times during this part of the conversation, and we all have just different ways that it like speaks to us, what we do, or like how we want to make that list, or what things end up going on the list. And so that's why I love having this part of the conversation, because all of those things, we're all kind of drawn to the same thing, but we do it in our own unique way that helps us do it, right? Just keep going. And like, so I love that. And I just love that you shared like a few of the major points that go on your list, like the ones that keep you as a human, like aligned with your values and aligned with your goals. It's not,
Yeah.
what I hear you saying in some of that too is also like, it's not a productivity like gluttony. It's more of a focusing on what's the most important to you, and like what you said, really like aligning each day with like, no, these things should be on my list as a human, rather than like, well, I just let me get as many things onto that list as possible so that I can just like feel the dopamine rush of crossing off meaningless things. Like that's not what I'm hearing in what you're saying at
No.
all.
And like the idea is like I've now checked enough things off of the list to understand that my day has about 10 things I can do in it.
Mm,
And so I use those 10 things really wisely. And so
yeah.
they're ordered, they're never ordered. Like I don't order my list.
Yeah.
Like taxes, unfortunately, is on the list right now. And it's
Right.
like, so right now it's a recurring task, and it's like, just spend a little bit of time
Yes.
doing the shit that is the taxes. And actually, speaking of, that's what I do for big time grants, trying to cycle it back to things that are musical,
Also,
right?
I want to like pop in really quickly and say like this episode is probably going to air much later, so just know that like Whitney's super on top of her taxes, not the other way around.
You're like, Whitney is going to have to file for severe bankruptcy.
No,
because
no.
totally asked everything
Super on top of it. We're just like you're hearing this episode later
later after
in the
tax.
cut. Yeah,
Everyone
like
has already been dealt the
so,
tax thing.
yeah.
No, totally. So I know that I've got like about 10, like the capacity for 10 things, which is why like composition is going to be one of those.
Yeah.
And I know that if composition is not one of those 10, I am a grumpy person because I don't feel like I've done that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that understanding your, you know, what you have in you during a normal day when you have normal sort of stuff, like what do my Tuesday usually yields 7 things that I can do. What are those 7 things going to be? Right. So sorry, bigger grants, bigger projects.
Yeah.
I find that sometimes like a really big task, and it kind of goes without saying, really needs to be broken up into smaller components and even to just be palatable.
Yep.
Like taxes.
Yep.
So, but big grants, also similar big ensemble pieces, not much different. Things like writing operas and musicals, it's like song by song we go, and like you just sort of like head down, right? So sometimes I find entering this world, I'm a really efficient worker, but I am not a stranger to procrastination.
I'm glad I'm not the only one, I guess.
I mean, we've been talking about taxes, but like I don't want to do them so bad. I started updating my website, if it gives you some idea of, right? And also I'm going to start this piano vocals. I got a bunch of unsavory things to do. Anyway, so whenever I have a really, 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 really big task, and this is my dissertation happened only by this stretch, which was, and I won't even, to take the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Yes.
Do whatever is easiest.
Yep.
Right up front. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
It does not matter.
Yep.
Once you have the momentum going, it is way easier to do the dumber things. So if you're sitting there, you know, like chattering on your teeth, being like, how am I going to just like you write this orchestra piece? Usually the first thing is just to like commit yourself to the fact that you are going to open a file to start the thing. And then the next thing I usually allow myself is like, well, let's write a bunch of crap first.
Yeah.
And this is the equivalent of a shitty first draft. I think that just getting it out is so a lot of like when I'm proposing a project, when I'm describing a project, when I'm thinking about like, you know, like a funding opportunity and I want them to know about my project, the first draft of what I'm talking about is like a crazy person is talking about their art. It's like, and then, you know, so the elephants come, like, it doesn't matter what it is. And it should be full of like, and that sounded like crap and moving on. Like it should be to whatever capacity, but the idea is to just go and do that idea of like, it gets easier when the momentum is going. And it's annoying because like, I hate working out worse than anything, but it's the first like 2 minutes of working out that I really despise the most. And usually after the first 2 minutes, I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Why was I complaining about it the whole time?
Yes.
Or worse yet, emails that sit in my inbox that really actually only require maybe at most 15 minutes of actual legitimate work, but they will sit in my psychological like inbox for much, much longer than that. Anyway, I hope a lot of people listening are like, it's me. She's talking about me, but it's actually me.
Right. Oh man, that's I was like, that's for real. That is the realest thing, right? I'm just trying to like find those ways, because that's a big part of it is usually I get stuck, or the emails that are actually 15 minutes but they're taking up like psychological space is usually because I haven't broken it down into like, what is this person actually asking for, or like, or are there multiple parts to this, right? Because usually you can take care of like the first thing. I loved your point about like low hanging fruit. Like just respond with the first thing and then say like, I'll get to the other things in this email later. Like
totally. I have I think our relationship with our inboxes is things that's going to change wildly over time. Who knows how much this comment that I make will even age for that matter. But the idea of like, I do have separate inboxes for separate things.
Yeah. Yep.
And I very much have a teacher hat,
Yep.
and teacher requests go to teacher inbox.
Yep.
And I deal with that in a very particular time of the day.
Yep.
And then I deal with it again 12 hours after that point.
Yep. Yep.
And it is not something that interrupts my putting your stuff on like do not disturb mode. Actually not being subject to notifications is a big sort of thing. So not being tethered to technology, I found, is another really important thing that has led to more productive days and less things that feel like, where did today go?
Yeah. And like more meaningful days. Like I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I'm feeling like meaning rather than simply productivity, right? Sometimes that's a difference for me, which is like checking all the things off the list, but were they the meaningful things on my list, right? Like,
Totally.
so
Yeah.
Whitney, I'm again kind of changing gears because I want to come back to like the artistic part of your life. And the next part of this is really just like I want to hear about what's on your list of things. Like what are you writing? What are you being filled up by? What's kind of, like fanning the flames of your artistic life at the moment?
So during the pandemic, Brittany Goodwin and I, a librettist I constantly work with, she and I did a big 2.5 hour opera, Princess Maleine, together right
Mm,
before the pandemic. We really obviously were upset by lockdown, by literally, as was everyone else. I'm not, our sentiment was not original. But the thing that I was really kind of, I got a bee in my bonnet about was the idea of like, well, what kind of an art are we supposed to be making at a distance with one another? And as someone who gravitates towards opera, like large scale forms is kind of where I am as a composer. I like the meeting place of music plus other things, which is why the Curiosity Cabinet exists. And so when the pandemic hit and we weren't going to be doing large scale things at all, and certainly not large scale things where people were interacting with one another, I was like, well, oh, this is an awkward time to be me right now. So Brittany and I wanted to make art that felt like it should be dealt with at a distance.
mm.
And so we wrote radio dramas that
Oh
were
yeah.
very much meant to be enjoyed in your own home, because that's
Yeah.
what radio dramas were.
Yes.
So a lot of my practice is about making historical nods to points in history. And I know it's really, really broad, but I'm a big believer in refabricating and repurposing things. And I think I live and breathe that. Everything that you see on screen right now is definitely not an original thing, right?
Right.
They've lived many other lives as like clothes, that sort of thing. I'm a secondhand sort of person for certain. And so reviving older forms for new purposes, very much something I'm into. So radio drama, we did 3 pandemic themed radio dramas. The most recent one just came out for Lunar New Year. It's about the outbreak of the bubonic plague in Chinatown in 1904, which if you didn't
Wow.
know about that, that's right after the big earthquake. Really very, very sad stories of obviously like racism and hate crimes in San Francisco, where I grew up. And so that was the third radio drama. The other 2, one is about New Orleans, and it is about the Axeman, the serial killer that was in New Orleans after the outbreak of the Spanish flu,
Uh-huh.
another pandemic. And then the first and original one that we did was an adaptation of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's essay called Home,
Mhm.
which is about the pandemic kept everyone at a homestay, and sort of the travesties that happened sort of in a very psychological way of being so isolated.
Right. Charlotte Perkins
So
Gilman being just such a great like font of all of that topic.
Yes. Yeah. So in fact, that's my second setting of something by her. I have an original adaptation of the Yellow Wallpaper as an opera, which is quite cool as well. So those three narrative and music driven projects are all out for public listening. One of the things that we recognized was that people were really hurting financially during the pandemic. And so, it's really, they're just there for your enjoyment and for your enjoyment only. So we don't ask any money for them. So if you want to listen to them or post the links, you're welcome to. But we had always kind of envisioned these things being staged as well. So in probably about a year from now, in spring 2024, we have projected plans to do staged double features of radio dramas, both these pandemic themed ones and some that are from the canon, like War of the Worlds and things by Agatha Christie. So that's very kind of in my wheelhouse in terms of areas of interest in marrying music plus other things. As we're exiting the pandemic, Brittany and I are working on another project. We are working on the immersive Prohibition jazz opera Fizz and Ginger, which is kind of takes a major nod to Sleep No More in terms of its style and feeling of putting the audience inside of what is happening with the theater. So quite literally put the double bar on one of the songs from it yesterday. Yay. I am in the heat of doing piano vocal reductions for that sort of stuff, which is not where my soul does its best singing, I will say, but that's okay. It has to be done. It's some of the work is not the beautiful, let's be inspired sort of thing. But I mean, we're talking like the lead singer is going to be in your lap sloshing a martini in your face. It's going to be. And I think, so in terms of what really gets me excited right now is the opportunity to get back in everyone's face, which I'm really hoping it's not too soon or anything like that. We're going to be smart about it, of course. But branching music out into other places that don't necessarily have music is more or less kind of what I am, what's fanning my fire. So
this might be a little bit more logistical, but are you and Brittany open to, singers who are listening, if they wanted to do this in their own institutions or organizations, are you open to them reaching out to you about that?
Heck yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, again, came before my list of things to do, my website underwent a really awesome update. So now it's got a lot more information about things that like operas and stuff that I've done. So you can rent the sheet music and stuff like that. One of the things that we're doing also is making a really good piano version of it so that you can pull out songs from it if you wanted to do it. They're very jazz oriented. They kind of rock an interesting line between kind of music theater and opera. There are changes, but they're all written out. There are keys, but we step out of them every once in a while. It's kind of, I don't know exactly what to compare it to, and I'm not trying to be it's so original, I don't even know, right? But it's definitely it's between those areas.
I think that's such that's a place where so many emerging artists really want to be exploring and don't always know that there are lots of options that they can pursue, and this being one of them. So I really want to connect people with going, that's something that I want to do. I want to try that. Let me find out more about this music. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and I think when I design an event or think about a piece that I'm writing, the end product is I want to put it in front of an audience, right? And then therefore my question is not to be pandering to my audience, but what does my audience want to see? And I think that sometimes makes me unpopular in a way. I think
Wait, unpack that for me really quickly.
So I think that like in terms of like from a granting agency perspective, I think that there are some things that we're really interested in looking for funding for. And I love that we are sort of stretching our ideas of the narratives, who should be speaking these stories. I love that. I'm totally all about that.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we forget that art need not be a horribly painful, like therapeutic experience all the time.
You
And
can say
that
that
like,
again.
and that like escapism is a huge, I watch a movie to escape. I read a book to escape. I
Yeah.
go and listen to music to escape.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean don't deal with heavy narratives. I'm wearing a lot of color right now, but I'm usually someone who definitely like trots a more gothic sort of line, right? But sometimes at the same time, like I'll like waltz out in pastels and you'll be like, holy moly, what's happening? And so I think that like we just I get a little sad because I think that we forget that things can just be fun.
Yeah. Well,
We
and that's overall better for everybody. Everybody that's applying for things, everybody that wants to engage with art, is that we have to be thoughtful about not only prioritizing people's like most traumatic things, like so that there's lots of space for art to help us tell our stories and engage each other, and all of the things that you want are available in art, right? So
yeah.
it's not just one or two things or the hardest things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in that way, whether it's, doing the sort of hard therapeutic thing or doing the sort of escapism thing or somewhere in between, I always ask myself, would I go and see it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would I go and see my own thing?
Yep.
And I know that sounds really stupid, but like if I'm putting on a concert of just like pieces of music that are just together, like on a kind of recital sort of situation, I always ask myself, like, what's the bigger theme here? Why would I see all these pieces together? Would I myself drag myself out if the weather was crappy to go to this thing? Right. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I sometimes think that like people just don't ask themselves that question. Would you go see that?
Oh, so
And
real. So real.
I want that answer to be without a doubt, 7 underlines yes.
Yeah.
I can deviate into a small side story, which is that like at National Sawdust, I was given a date, which I love the venue National Sawdust, but they gave me the shittiest date and the shittiest time in human history. It was like late, it was like maybe early February. It's awful here in New York City in early February. And it was like the middle of the week, a Wednesday, and it was like a late concert. It was like at 10:30 or something.
No.
I was like, wow, like you pretty much gave me a death sentence
Yeah.
of a date, right? So I had to ask myself, I was like, what will get everyone out there, no matter all of these things that I just said?
Yes. Yes.
So what is that answer? Well, that answer at the time was an erotic opera. And I'd like, and it was sold out.
Amen. Yes.
It was sold out. And so I think people just need to ask themselves really that question a little bit more often. What would make you give up your night? Your time is precious.
Yeah.
What is it? What would it be? And would you go to your own thing?
I love that. Whitney, those are such great questions. And I really value that because, as you know, one of my favorite things to talk about is curiosity, right? And those questions are such a great example of like asking yourself, what is like really figuring out, kind of even going back full circle to where we started, you know, and and so that does bring me to my question about, I think that curiosity is a superpower. So what is something you're so good at asking yourself questions? What is something that you're deeply curious about these days?
Deeply curious. Oh my gosh. I mean, I want to know, like really specific or very, very like,
It's an
oh
open-ended
gosh.
question.
I mean, I'm curious. Oh gosh. Like
It's
everything.
hard.
It's really hard. I want to know how to be like I want to know how to put food together intuitively.
Ooh, I like that one.
Like a chef. Like
Yeah.
I really would like to, I'm really, really freaking curious about that. Okay, because I don't have like a troubled relationship to food, but I'm not someone who like, I don't know, I like kind of like don't feel anything like here or there about food a little bit
Right.
sometimes. And so one thing that I do really go absolutely bananas for is like when food is really like carefully thought out and like considered. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I do that? And I guess
Yeah.
I'm curious about how do I do that for myself?
Yes. Yes. Right?
I mean, aside from wanting to know literally how everything works all the time, I'm like, oh, I want to know how to score a video game. I'm like, well, I know how to like write the music, and I like, but you
Yeah.
know, if we're talking about totally outside of my area of interest,
Yeah.
I want to know, I want to know how to intuitively kind of cook.
I love that. Ooh, that's such a good one. Yeah, I feel like so much of our lives, like we're all just like curious beings. We're just like, I want to know about that. How does that happen? Tell me more about this, right? Obviously, I run a podcast in which I get to just ask people questions all day long. So I'm like curious is my state of being. And so I just love hearing about, what is one of the things that's like sparking yours? And I think that putting food together like intuitively is such a beautiful response. I think that's great.
Just like, I don't know, like in a way where you're like, ooh, this was like a Michelin sort of
Yeah.
experience for me, but
Right?
it was at home and I did it. And, you know,
Yeah.
just thinking the same way that I think about composition in other areas, I guess, like edible
Yeah.
ways or
Exactly.
smell or something. I wonder how I could use this in other sort of, areas, not
I
to make
like
it all,
that.
but
No,
yeah.
that's perfect. Perfect. Whitney, thank you so much. This has been
Oh,
such a pleasure. I want to ask you one more thing. Please tell the listeners, please tell the viewers where they can interact with you on the interwebs before I let you go.
sure. So, like I said, my website underwent such a beautiful change. So, I would be so happy if you all went to my website. It's whitneygeorge.com. You can also find literally every single link to any social media channel right there on my website too. I'm on
Perfect.
SoundCloud, I'm on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. If you're looking for my album releases, they are on Spotify with Pinch
Fantastic.
Records. But you'll find a lot of stuff, like especially if you're looking for chamber music or things to program, there's a lot of archival things on my SoundCloud, but like a lot. So
Excellent.
yeah, listen there.
Ooh, okay. Well, I personally will also be going there. So thank you. Like, Whitney, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is,
Thank you.
I could talk to you all day long about all the things. And so I'll just have to have you back and also just come hang out with you in the future. So I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and just being so generous with the way that you see the world. It means a lot to me. And I know that everybody listening just gets a lot out of it. So thank you so much for being a
Thank you.
masterclass guest. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much.